A very big welcome to everyone. And it's great to see so many people on this webinar. Obviously, it's a topic that touches all of us very deeply, and really appreciate the time you've spent coming here to have deeper conversations. And I think from our analysis, I think we have people from 12 different countries on this webinar. And we have people from many different sectors and backgrounds as well. So we have people from the business sector, health, finance, public sector, international NGOs, local NGOs, education, a whole range of experiences and a whole range of points of view on what they have to offer, as well as people from different ages. So we're really delighted to have such a mixture. And what we wanted to focus on is how the COVID-19 crisis has challenged our current practices and provided an opportunity for us to not only think differently, but act differently to create the sustainable future that we all want. There's been lots of very tragic things that have been happening, but there are also very good opportunities as to how we can be more sustainable. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I'm going to hand over to Rosie, who's just going to talk through the format of today and the plan. But just again to say, delighted to have everyone here, and I know it's going to be such a rich session, so thank you. Rosie.
Thank you, Lorna. So yeah, welcome today. Today the webinar is called Challenging Today to Create Tomorrow. Purpose, People, Planet and Prosperity in a COVID and post-COVID world. What difference will we make? And we're delighted to have 4 incredible speakers that will be speaking today. We have Sharon Turnbull, who I'll be passing over to next, who is one of the Kepler Horizons advisors, and she's also a leadership development specialist and academic. So thank you very much, Sharon, and Sharon's been the main mastermind behind this webinar, so very, very big thank you there. We'll then be passing over to Shivani Singhal, who's from Udaipur in India. And Shivani is also one of our advisors, and she works with a charity called Dharohar, and Dharohar work with children, helping to sort of build curiosity and awareness in the place she works. We'll then be passing over to Pandyan. Pandyan is also in India, but he's in Tamil Nadu, so a different area of India. And Pandyan has worked with human rights for the last 20 years. And he's associated with CEDAR, one of our partner organisations, working on children rights advocacy, and he works a lot with Dalit communities there. And then finally, we've got Laura Vickery, who's based in the UK, and she's the chair of our board. And Laura is actually a specialist in sustainability, so it will be great to hear her reflections on all that's been said. So thank you very much, Laura. So before we go on, just to say that we are recording the session today, so hopefully that's okay with everyone. If you could try and keep yourselves on mute where possible, that would just help with interference and that sort of thing. And so for the first bit, as I said, we're going to hear from some speakers and hear about different perspectives on sustainability. And then we will move into some group discussions, and you'll each have a facilitator who will guide you through some discussions around sustainability and the different areas that have been discussed. And then we'll bring it back for a plenary where we'll hear some points of view, and we'll close. So it should take around an hour and a half in total. So thank you very much, and I will pass over to Sharon.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to see so many of you. I can hear somebody else talking. Some background or okay. Yeah, so as Lorna and Rosie have said, we're here to talk, and the speakers are here to provoke your thinking, and then we're going to break into groups, smaller groups, so you all have an opportunity to talk through some of these some of these challenges that we have ahead. So objectives to consider the opportunities and challenges for change in order to create a more sustainable future. And as Lorna said, COVID has produced some awful, terrible challenges and outcomes, but also some small shoots of change that we may be able to build on. So Rosie, if you could put the 4 Ps of thank you very much. So Capital Horizons, after much debate and discussion, has drawn on a number of different views and perspectives of sustainable development. Obviously Elkington's triple bottom line is in there, and the Sustainable Development Goals and the Brundtland report, and we came up with 4 Ps which we found have been most helpful for us in terms of thinking about how Capital Horizons and our wider community of individuals and organizations, how we can make a difference. So what I would like to do is to just spend 5 minutes or so just talking about those 4 Ps that we're going to focus on today, so that we can then, when we break into breakout groups, we can be thinking about, how we can focus around those Ps to really make some changes and make a difference in our own practices. So just to move on to the next slide and just say something about that. So purpose, for us, it's very important to think about purpose and also to work with organizations to think about the guiding principles behind purpose, what we're here to do in our work, but in our lives as well. And how do those principles and how does that purpose inform our behaviors and our practice? And this, as I say, can be both in terms of ourselves as individuals, our organizations, our communities, and society as a whole. And these things kind of connect to a deeper sense of purpose. Some might use the word soul or spirituality, but it's about, fundamentally, what are we here to achieve? So that's the purpose P. And of course, all of these overlap. So when we are talking about these things, we're inevitably going to stray across all 4 Ps at any one time, I'm sure. The people, P, would be around the sort of social injustices we see in society and in our communities. And how do we tackle that injustice? How do we promote and work with human rights? And we have some great people on the call today, including our speakers, who have done a huge amount to tackle inequality and human rights wherever possible. So people would be, how do we address what we see as wrong around people's lives in society today? And then planet would be, of course, about how do we tread more softly on the planet? How do we look after those fragile ecosystems that are for future generations? How do we control and manage the use of our natural resources so that future generations can thrive and survive into the future? And again, we have some real experts on the call today who've done huge amounts of work around planet. And the final one we call prosperity. There was obviously the original triple bottom line was profit. For us, it's about being equitable with the resources that we have, being fair, enabling all people on the planet to lead fulfilling lives in harmony with nature, and to employ the resources that we have optimally to achieve a balance economically, a global balance, so that everyone has enough for their needs. So those are the 4 Ps that we're going to be focusing around today. And if you don't like those 4, you prefer other words, that's also fine, but these are the ones that we use in Capital Horizons. So some of the questions, and I'm just going to flick to 4 slides, and you've seen some of these, those of you who've read the briefing document, some of the things that we've asked our speakers to think about and some of the things that we'd like you to think about in the breakout groups. So the first one is questions around purpose. So actually with the pandemic, we've seen a shift, and we've seen a shift here in the UK, but we've also noticed a shift across the globe in terms of people's sense of purpose now. It fundamentally seems to have changed the way we are living our lives. And so the question that we ask is this human spirit that we've seen around us, is that energy that seems to have emerged as a result of battling the pandemic, is this something that we can build on? Is it something that will enable us to work and renew the planet that's so damaged around us? And has it actually started to enable us to reconnect with some kind of deeper purpose or soul to work towards a sustainable future? And again, you know, there's some debate as to, is it really, or has it, or is it already, was this sense of humanity already there? Had we lost it? Had we become completely immersed in sort of capitalist world and lost our sense of responsibility for each other? And is that coming back? And how could we regenerate that? So those kind of questions would be the purpose questions that we want to set. And then moving on to people. Oh, and sorry, I should have said in that last slide that lovely picture, that is, Pandya will recognize it, that's Cedar, and I'll tell you as we move on. So some of these pictures are of our partners and work that's going on in the partners. So moving on to people, this one is a picture of the Children Watch, and Raj, there you are in this one. So you're famous in the in this webinar already. So some of the questions around people. So what about the multiple acts of human kindness and communityship that we've been seeing during global lockdown? And that's happening right under our noses in our communities. Some work, people have taken a real focus on making sure that nobody is ignored, nobody is left behind. And I think we've seen that everywhere, some amazing stories. So is humanity actually now starting to reject the culture of greed and accumulation and inequality that was taken over, or appeared to be taking over? And can we now build on that? Can we work together to halt that widening gap between the top and bottom of the pyramid? And again, something that many of you are already doing some amazing work on. How do we build on the values of kindness and love and caring and social justice that we're seeing some small shoots all over the world during this pandemic? What do we do? How do we sustain that? And then moving to planet questions. This is a picture of United Purpose in the Gambia, a woman taken and working with United Purpose. So simple question, what actions can we now take individually and collectively to nurture the healing of the natural world? And you know, there have been some interesting stories about nature reviving. How do we build on that? How do we act in a way that's less harmful to the planet? And finally, prosperity, that big question about balancing Rosie, if you can move on to prosperity. Thank you. So the question of how do we balance the wealth of the planet, the wealth of the world, so there's enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed, as Gandhi so aptly said. This is also from Children Watch in Tamil Nadu. And so how do we make sure the resources and wealth of our planet are shared equitably and responsibly? So those are the big questions that we would like to focus on. And so I'm going to hand over firstly to Shivani. And Shivani has very kindly agreed to talk through her experience and her thoughts on purpose and how purpose links to people. So Shivani, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. As Rosie very kindly introduced me, I run a small nonprofit in Udaipur in India, and the bulk of our work has been focused around getting volunteers from local businesses, training them up and getting them to work with young people in the community. And the idea has always been that professionals who are working need certain skills, and they can develop those skills most effectively whilst helping young people, sometimes from very deprived communities, sometimes perfectly sort of privileged children, gain things that schools cannot give them. And the COVID time has been really interesting for us because 95% of our work was done either with our volunteers going into schools or going into a centre that we run. And obviously within a day that became impossible. And so we were left with the interesting challenge of what does it really mean for us to add value at this time? And just reflecting back on the last 5 months almost, or 4 months, I could see we sort of got caught in a bit of a swinging motion, because there are the things that we knew that we were really good at, which were these learning experiences and helping adults and young people learn together. And then there was what seemed to be the need of the hour, which really had, in some ways, nothing to do with our areas of expertise. And it was very tempting to jump into, well, can we find ways of getting masks to people in food packets? And it really made us think hard about this word purpose and consider whether we wanted to react in a way which was useful right now versus what might be useful 3, 6, 9 months out. And I think right at the start, honestly, we went for the short-term win of, okay, well, can we create activity packs to send out to parents and children to keep them occupied and learning? And that was fine. But actually, as we looked at it more closely, we said it's missing the core of what makes us a useful organization to exist and different. And that really led us to think about people. And as Sharon was saying, the COVID times have brought about some awful things, but they have created, I think, within a lot of people, a sense that I am more deeply connected to every other human in my community than I think we previously realized. And that desire to volunteer and that desire to engage with the community is far stronger now. And over the last sort of month and a half, we've been going back and saying, okay, we can't get our volunteers into schools, and lots of the children that we serve don't have digital connections. I'm guessing the folks in Tamil Nadu will have experienced something similar. It's the most vulnerable kids are the hardest to reach. They don't have internet and they don't have mobile phones floating around. And so we've now gone back to partnering with the schools we've been working with to find out, can we create worksheets? Can we do things via telephone conversations? And can we get volunteers connected up to kids again? And in lots of ways, I don't think we found the solution, but coming to that question of what makes us, I don't want to say special, but what is it that we do differently? And what is it that is a special value add that we can bring to the table has helped us figure out how we sort of tack in a different direction to get to that same vision that we always had, but maybe the paths need to look a bit different. And so, yeah, I think that's really been my big learning and experience from this time. So yeah, thank you for the space to share, and back to you, Sharon.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Really interesting, you know, that sense of, you know, now or future or both, and how do we balance that? I'm sure we'll want to talk about, and also that sense of being more connected to others than we thought before, and that's happening in communities or wider. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you for being concise and keeping to time. That's wonderful. So Pandian, I can't see you on my screen. You must be on the other end of the list of people, but Pandian, can I hand over to you now, please, to talk about prosperity?
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Shivani, for setting a tone. And thank you for this opportunity. And this is a very important time. We are discussing about four important themes: people, planet, prosperity, and purpose. And my understanding of prosperity is not only a state of financial stability, but I strongly believe in that the prosperity in a state of stability of having a justice and equitable resource sharing too. In the context of COVID-19 pandemic was turned the world upside down in all aspects and put forth a great challenge to the human beings and existence. And the pandemic also further worsened the existing equity and reinforced discrimination and exclusion. There were several examples across the global, and the poor, marginalized, daily laborers, historically excluded communities forced into utmost hunger, starving, and denial of equality and justice through the pandemic. At the same time, COVID-19 has given opportunity to everyone to have a new life experience. The experiences differs at various levels, and honor and privilege and exclusion, physical violence and peace and justice. We need to important to value the prosperity in a social justice perspective, especially in a pandemic. I just wanted to share the experiences from India. The immediate lockdown for the last 4 months, people are struggling to manage their everyday life. And I have been working in this human rights field for the past 20 years. And I could witness there were 33 incidents of brutal forms of caste atrocity, police atrocity, including rape of children, rape and murder of children, murder, physical violence, Dalit village, and lockup deaths occurred in Tamil Nadu. Denial of equity and equality, justice becoming a high and increased impunity even in people. We call it Dalit in India, completely abandoned, excluded, denied, ignored by the state due to historical biased attitude based on the caste and identity, class, even gender and religion too. There were 19 deaths reported in India during the pandemic, all the 19 deaths by the police, and it was subjected to beating and caning of public due to COVID-19 enforcement, lockdown enforcement. 7 people have died in a police custody. I just wanted to share a case which is so much disturbed and very sensational in Tamil Nadu. It was happened in June 10th. Mr. Mani, an innocent belonging to Kuravar community. Kuravar is one of the criminal tribes notified during the British colony in India. The Criminal Tribe Act was repealed after independence in India, but still the criminal identity is continuing against this community by replacing another act. So this man was searched by the police, and the day was very normal as like others, except by Mani's wife. On June 10th, Mani went out of his home. He was not returned back to his home. After a few hours, Mani's wife learned that he was died in a police custody, and they found Mani was hanging in a tree. This is one incident I just wanted to share with you all. And the second incident, the innocent traders, Mr. Jairaj and Phoenix, Jairaj's father and Phoenix's son, they were traders, and they were brutally tortured. They were custody in 19th June, and they found 22nd June, the son was died in a judicial custody, and the father was died in 23rd, the second day after his son's death. They were not commit any offense, but it was a simple reason, the ego of the police and the colonial perspective continued in the police department in India, looting, violence and atrocities against the innocent. The culture of silence still remains in India for various reasons. In this context, the human beings, we need to keep deeper conviction, commitment to work towards restoring, regaining everyone's life with dignity, equality, peace and justice by rejuvenating the spirit of social justice to achieve prosperity. And that context, we need to extend cooperation, support, and solidarity across the globe. Also, we need to intensify the social conversation and dialogue on promoting the equity, equality, inclusion, and achieve social justice in a larger space. And also there is a need of effective monitoring of an incidence of human rights violations and exclusion discriminations that are reported. And there should be litigations need to be filed to bring a state accountability. And also, this is very much important to console, handle, and accompany the survivors and the marginalized, especially in the pandemic, and also the effort need to be continued in the post-pandemic response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pandyan. There was the sound was a little bit weak in the middle there, but I think it was very, very powerful to hear you talk from your own experiences and to understand how far we still have to go with some of the atrocities as well that we've seen in the COVID pandemic, some of the violence and some of the and I loved your what you were saying about the culture of silence. I mean, we definitely have to do something to unlock that and to challenge it whenever we can. So thank you very much for bringing that to life, and so sad to hear what a long way we have to go still everywhere, but your experiences are very powerful. Thank you. So now I'd like to hand over to Laura. Laura is the chair of Capital Horizons as well as an expert in this field of sustainable development. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Sharon. Wow, how to follow that? Well, let me firstly say a big thank you as well to Shivani and Pandyan for your really generous and articulate and heartfelt contributions there. Real food for thought, and thank you for setting the tone for the breakout sessions as well going forward. So what I'd like to do is just reflect on a couple of the issues which I think have already been raised, and then add a couple in addition myself. So Shivani, I think you beautifully captured the almost a journey that your organisation has been through, and questioning purpose and the balance between immediate short-termism, but also looking to the longer term, and really distilling what makes your organisation different, where you can add the most value. And I think that that's a really key question that we really need to ask ourselves in times of uncertainty, because your instinct, your inclination is just to go and do, but actually I think often there's greater value in taking that step to reflect and to learn and to consider and to consult and see actually what is your kind of unique contribution that you can make. And so that was very, very interesting to hear, and how you've applied that to the skills-based volunteering that you're in a position to help with. I particularly liked your sentence that came very near the end, which was that your organisation has retained the same vision, so that long-term aspiration of what the change you want to see in the world and your part in it. But the path is different, and I think actually that's really wise. And I think what we're seeing throughout this period of uncertainty is organisations either looking at their purpose and really kind of seeing it come to life. So it's not just words on a piece of paper, but actually seeing their purpose manifest in action. But also organisations that didn't necessarily know they had a purpose, seeing a natural purpose or their kind of natural soul, to go back to that sort of more humanitarian way of language, come to the fore. And I think in those situations, it's going to be really important that people take the time to really understand what it is that's happened and capture that and try and actually codify it in some way, because often people can have conversations about the changes they want to see, but really I think the proof of action is so important. How do you take a purpose, how do you actually match it to your strategy, match it to the job descriptions in your organization, and bridge that gap between changes you want to see to operations and making things happen in practice. Pandiam, wow, what a privilege to hear you talking just then, and really getting straight in with issues of equality and social justice and dignity, and a stark reminder, I think, that in this period we're actually seeing a widening, I think, of polarization of actions and attitudes. So I think in one sense we're seeing organizations, for instance, who are already quite purpose-led becoming more so. So if you look at the big organizations like Unilever, IKEA, organizations like that, they are very much sticking to their original plans in terms of the 4 Ps, and accelerating them, if anything. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, there are people, organisations out there that are unscrupulous and are actually taking advantage of the gaps and the chaos that abounds to slip in bad practices which are exacerbating inequality and things like that. And of course that's the fragility of this situation, and what is most terrifying about it. If I can just segue a little bit into the planet, just to make sure that we discuss that a little bit as well. I think Sharon alluded to this in the introduction, that we have seen some green shoots emerge from the pandemic, and particularly lockdown. So in terms of kind of carbon emissions, for instance, the volumes of flights have gone down significantly. In fact, I was reading just this morning an article in the Guardian newspaper saying that air traffic halved in mid-March compared to last year. And in terms of road traffic in the UK, in April, this actually fell by more than 70% compared to a year previous. Personally, I've been quite heartened by the coverage of things like finding dolphins in Venice, and my mother-in-law actually sent us an article saying that badgers and deer have been found in Sheffield city centre rail station. So things like that are very visible signs of a change. But I hate to put the but on the end of this, the truth is these changes are terribly, terribly fragile, and the risk we have is that unless we capture again these good instances, and we somehow manage to bottle it and systemize it and use it to really drive our kind of campaigning side, then we do risk things going back to normal, or even worse, actually the gains that we've made being reversed. So I think probably that will bring me to the final point I want to make, which is about action. I think all of us here feel that we want to really do something to kind of highlight and to capture the small seeds of optimism and green shoots that we've been seeing, and make sure that they can survive into the future beyond immediate lockdown and pandemic, and really allow us to build back better, to use that phrase that seems to be popular at the moment. And I think key to this is it's about seeing relationships between people, because I do believe that is actually the key, and it's the humanization, it's the deeper connections that we're seeing. It's recognizing that relationships between people, in whatever way they manifest, whether with colleagues, whether with customers, suppliers, just with your fellow people in your community, it's all about relationships. And often in the business world, things are transactional. people only want to kind of have contact with each other as far as a transaction is required, but actually it's quite an inhuman way of looking at things. So let's try and move from this kind of transactional mindset to a relationships mindset. And in fact, there's an organization, a charity called Blueprint for Better Business, which has written very articulately about this. And let's also, as a final thought, not forget our power as consumers. So Edelman, who do research on trust, have said that 2/3 of people claim to choose or switch or avoid or boycott brands based on societal issues. We need to make our voice heard, whether that's through our choices or whether it's how we talk to our decision makers. So another example could be the commitment, which is something that Kaplan Horizons is actually supporting at the moment, in a way for people to really make their voice heard to political decision makers about really taking bold action to deal with climate change, to deal with biodiversity loss that we're seeing in a non-combative way, but just say, this really matters to me, and give personal accounts of why they're so dedicated and so passionate about that issue. So let's make our voices heard. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura. That was wonderful. Very inspiring. Thank you to all of you, all three of you. So now it's time for us all to have a conversation. And we've got about 20 minutes in the breakout rooms, and no doubt, Rosie, you'll let us know when we have to come back to plenary. So the questions that, obviously there were questions around all 4 Ps. Just so, because you won't remember all those, here's some questions to take into the group rooms. So we'd just like you to share your experiences, your ideas, your stories, your challenges, whatever seems to be useful. So questions, what are those opportunities and challenges for change arising from COVID-19 in your world? And we've got a wonderful mix of people from not-for-profit, from business, so independent people, consultants, all sorts, and everybody, I think, has, everybody will have something, I think, to say around this. And, Laura's asked the final question there, how do we make our voices heard? How do we build the relationships where we can work together? How do we deal with the fragility of the green shoots that we see around us in terms of nature and the planet? So what are those opportunities and challenges? And secondly, in the light of the 4 Ps, how can we as leaders work towards sustainable futures? How do we put it as our top priority? How do we deal with the present, as Shivani said, at the same time as thinking long-term, future generations, our children, grandchildren, grandchildren's grandchildren? How do we actually make sure that the world is still a sustainable place for those people? And also, how do we make the world a better place? As Pandian was saying, how do we get more dignity, equality, peace, justice in the world now and the future? So just a small challenge for us to all crack in 20 minutes. Thank you very much for your attention so far, and please stay on, and you're going to be moved into group rooms.
Okay, Lancia, you just click join, and then you'll be in the room with Lorna. And Raj, can you click the button? Have you got a button that says join? Oh, are we the only one?
First to arrive here.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So yeah, I'm just going to sort of coordinate this part of it. And I just asked the facilitators if you could send me any notes of particular things you'd like me to kind of share, or people that you any stories. I'm just going to I can start off with two, because I know that I've got two good examples of things that have come up really interesting. If I could just invite Jill from Rutherford Cancer Care to share about sort of what you, in terms of people, the issues around sustainability of supporting people and flexible working. Jill, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got 200 staff in our business, and half of those are clinically hands-on, and the remainder are sort of support services. So I've actually been managing the whole HR service from home, which I never thought I would ever find myself in this situation. And for me, as I advised Ian and Phil, the flexibility of our staff has been absolutely tremendous. We've all found ourselves working in very, very difficult scenarios from a clinical perspective, and also from working from home as well. So that to me has been a real key driver for our staff. And also, whilst we're looking after patients at the same time and giving them the confidence to come in and still continue with their cancer care treatment, is the staff. And, you know, everybody deals with their stresses in their own way and their anxiety levels, but our managers have done an exceptional job in supporting their staff members through their sort of leadership skills and competences that they have. But for us, mental health and well-being, as I'm sure is featured in many businesses, is key at this time. And you know, we have the EAP programs, we have occupational health, we have a staff welfare officer that we've brought in specifically to support our staff who are self-isolating or shielding, just so that they have that on top regular contact, as well as their managers. So, you know, I'm really, really proud as a business that whilst we're supporting our patients, we're also providing as much support as we can for our staff during this pandemic. And I think for me, the feedback from our staff has been tremendous, and I think that they do all feel really, really well supported.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jill. I'm just going to, I've now got a flurry of messages. I've probably got too many. I'm Jeff, our Cumbrian representative. Apparently, you've got a really good story to share about the environment versus power in the hands of the few. Sue has sent me a little message about that. Maybe you could share that story, if that's okay.
All right. It's a picture that was sent to me the other day by a friend, and I'm sure we've all been outraged by these pictures of people who've been kind of wild camping and just left everything behind them and really kind of trashed an area. And the question that the friend of mine sent the picture, and he said, "What do you see here?" And I said, "Well, you know, it's some people have come to this place and they've trashed it and they've left all this litter and they're expecting somebody behind." And he said, "If you look behind it, there's 100 acres of grouse moor there that virtually nobody has any access to. It's a completely despoiled natural environment. And we are putting the blame on the few people who've kind of trashed this small area, and we're ignoring the few people that own the vast majority of our landscapes because they have privilege, they are establishment." So it's very, very easy to kind of knee-jerk reaction and look at the immediate, and looking behind that at what the structural issues are that are causing these problems.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jeff. I've also got it from Sue. She was saying overall in your group, one of your key themes coming through was an awareness of contradictions, which kind of links to some of what you were just saying there, Jeff, very well. I'm just going to bring in Chinaraj. I'm not sure that you know that you're going to say something, but Lorna's just said that you have a very interesting thing to say about how your work in Tamil Nadu to engage children has fostered better collaboration. So Chinaraj, are you able to say that, say something around it?
Yeah, it's right. You know, I was just trying to say that, you know, the government in a big way organized the relief, but it was totally insensitive to the needs of the children, especially children coming from the marginalized background. The biggest challenge was the digital divide. They never even thought about their nutritional status or their need. So we thought we can do something which is very context specific and meaningful. So what we did was not only to really organize some relief, giving them some nutritional material and dry ration, we thought we should really take care of their psychological well-being. So what we thought was to really write down a manual, an art manual, which can just really help them to really creatively engage their time, so that they are not put into some kind of a boredom or distress, or even sometimes slip into some kind of psychological depression. It worked extremely well because the manual was done in such a way that it's not only self-directional, but also it can be collaborative. If younger children can't understand a portion of it, they can always take it to their parent or the volunteer who was periodically visiting the homes, maintaining, of course, the social distance norms and things of that kind. So it really made children spend their time very meaningfully, usefully, and very joyfully. And today we had a very interesting feedback session where everybody said that extremely good things about what the children have been doing. And they say that, you know, it's much more than going back to school. Coming back to the Children's Resource Center is a thing which they are all waiting for. So what I'm trying to say here is that the government was not very helpful. The civil society was completely depleted of its imagination resource. I'm not saying that as a matter of self-aggrandizement or anything, but you know, the populist state made everybody to stand aloof and say that we will do it, you keep off. But we thought we can just step in. Now, even the senior bureaucrats in Tamil Nadu feel that what we have been doing is, you know, the right thing to do. And a lot of praise is coming through. The press is slowly, the mainstream press is slowly trying to recognize what we have been doing. Previously, they never used to even care to really even print a news. But now, slowly, the mainstream is trying to understand what we do is something which is very meaningful. The Department of Education has taken it seriously. In one center, when we released this manual, the district educational official was there. Originally, the district head of the administration, the district magistrate, the collector, he released it. You know, these are all things which I see as a kind of a process through which we can really try to handhold with different agencies, not only with the civil society, but also even with the government agencies, like, and cut a dent into their otherwise cold, very cold attitude.
Very good. Oh, thank you so much for that, Chinraj. That was very powerful. I'm just going to bring in Peter, because apparently you've got something to say about climate change, and then I might bring in Charlotte. Not sure what she might say, but Laura's encouraged that. But I think you've got something to say about climate change from another perspective. Is it, Peter?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ian. Though it's slightly daunting to have Charlotte following me, we had a great discussion, because I came away really encouraged. I thought the pandemic had rather sort of overshadowed climate change, but the group's message was much more positive. I mean, clearly the way in which we're operating online means that carbon emissions have gone down, and that a lot of that's permanent. People will now be having online meetings rather than traveling. We heard that many young people have been prompted by the pandemic to rethink about what their purpose is as they look for roles and jobs. And then Clive was saying that really it was really helpful cooperation, for example, between Green Alliance and Climate Coalition, triggered by the pandemic. And most miraculously of all, this cooperation was leading to the government listening. So I thought that was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll bring in Charlotte now, and after that, I've got Usman from the Gambia, who might have something to say about climate change and things like that. But let's go to Charlotte next. Can you come in, Charlotte?
Yeah. So I was really interested about the idea of opportunity and challenge, and thinking about human behaviour and the way people kind of think and feel. So obviously the commitment is all about kind of encouraging bold government change from people, giving politicians a mandate. And with COVID, it was so interesting to see the government acting so boldly, making these changes, which some of them we could only really have dreamed of, and then people kind of accepting it and going along with it. And I think despite obviously it being a hugely challenging and very difficult and very sad time for a lot of people, there are these shoots of hope. And, you know, quite a lot of people kind of anecdotally that I know who perhaps haven't really, climate change hasn't been at the top of their priority in the past, have kind of unprompted said, you know, we can't go back to the way things were, we need to do this. But I think a challenge and a really important one is how people feel about the climate crisis. So COVID was very definitely a crisis, and things changed from, you know, one day to the next. Whereas I feel like the climate crisis isn't seen in the same way by a lot of people, and I'm not sure what it will take to enable people to really see it as the crisis that it is. So yeah, opportunities, but quite big challenges. And I'm kind of interested by human behaviour and how we kind of do that. And we were talking about the connectedness of people, to allowing them to see that they're connected to their world, and to biodiversity and all of that kind of thing. And so if we damage that, we're damaging ourselves. So Clive was talking a lot about educating people in that sense.
Okay. Oh, that's really good. I think what we'll do is there's another point I know that's going to link to that, Charlotte. I'll come to someone else in a moment on that. But Usman, I'll do as I promised and come to the Gambia. What would you like to comment about from your perspective in the Gambia and issues around sustainability?
I think issues of sustainability, well, are problematic sometimes. Especially in the light of the COVID, you will see that there are restrictions, and NGOs and government staff or government institutions could not move to the farming communities, and support in terms of training has been scaled down. Training is very important for sustainability. That has been seriously scaled down. And you would also realize that with the COVID, there are problems with immune system enhancement, but we're very lucky with regards to what this project is doing here, that is the biofortification project of the United Purpose, because we are pushing crops like the orange flesh sweet potato that has vitamin A. We are pushing crops like the palm millet that has zinc and iron. And most of these things are immune enhancing crops. And with regards to climate change, the palm millet is also early maturing and is also drought tolerant. Those are crops that are very good for climate change activities. But with regards to government support with the COVID, the government has supported the farming community, at least 84% of the households in the country, with rice and vegetable oil. But the interesting thing is some of these foods do not contain much of nutrition enhancing substances. So it is important that nutrition is really pushed in this area. But what we are doing, we are communicating with farmers, with extension workers, with mother clubs through WhatsApp. And in the WhatsApp, we've been encouraging them to continue growing the orange fresh sweet potato, to continue growing the palm millet, the vegetables, so that they eat a lot of them, so that will enhance their immune system, especially against the COVID. Yes, that is actually what is happening at the moment. But government has also trying to support farmers in actually buying the vegetables. Because of the problem of restrictions, most of the vegetables are not being bought. So there is a lot of post-harvest losses in the country. So government has organized some private bodies to buy the vegetables from the farmers, especially vegetables like onions, but it is not very organized. It is kind of a firefighting. So those are issues that will not also help sustainability. Yes.
Thank you. That's brilliant, Usman. Thank you very, very much. Great to see you. I'm just going to bring in, I understand James Streeter, you've got something on personal responsibility that in Sharon's group that I think is really important to share. And then I think I'll bring in Philip, that you've got a really good framework that we might consider using or that you found very helpful in your context. Yeah, James. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Ian. I think the first point really is about, I think we've all got to really recognize that essentially the pandemic was caused by, sustainability in the broadest sense, population pressure and food systems. And I think we've got to then realize that the second point is about the connectivity. So the connectivity across the planet and the impact across the planet has been so huge. And just picking up on Charlotte's point about climate change, because if we draw parallels between the pandemic, what it's done to the global population and to the planet, I think that this is the way forward to make that linkage with other issues such as climate change. If you and also food systems and other sort of global issues. On the personal point, there's been a lot of talk about what are they going to do? You know, what must change? I think that it's really important that we own this ourselves, because we can't rely on, you know, governments and large corporations and organizations to do all this on our behalf. We've got to own it, make the changes ourselves, and then I think it's about bringing this sort of purpose together and supporting each other through this change. I think it's really important that we make small changes ourselves, but collectively they stack up.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. That's a really powerful one there in terms of, like, you know, focusing where we need to. Phil, if you could just come in with your point from your university. I gather you've got something like 19,000 students at your university and 4,000 staff or something. So as head of sustainability, I think what's the key tool that you've used to kind of during this COVID time and to share that with others?
I think the challenges, as we know, we are on unprecedented time. I think what I decided to do was look at, because I had diverse stakeholders, and I felt the message has to be consistent. It has to appeal to different stakeholders. So the mega trends that highlight the key challenges was a key tool that I've used so far. And then the other aspect is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I've put both tools together, and I've delivered 2 sessions on environmental sustainability skills to the workforce. Despite the lockdown, I observed that there's a key main interest about sustainability, as well as what we can do as individuals across Queen Mary University. And we had 58 staff attend 2 sessions in May and July. Regarding students, because they are different courses, so I felt introducing and giving students the option to do a CPD course on environmental sustainability was key, that focused on the principles and application on sustainable development. A good aspect is, despite the lockdown, I've had 143 students register for this optional module. So the learning for me is that despite the lockdown, despite the challenges we face, there's that interest among key stakeholders as we keep on engaging with them. Particularly, the main reason why I use the UN Sustainable Development Goal is it talks to different people, from HR to management, and I think it's for us to probably explore more tools that are relevant to our area of work. I think that's my contribution so far.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Phil was in our breakout group and just explaining how the SDG goal framework can sometimes be a really useful one in terms of different examples. So I'm sure you could get in touch with him after if you were inspired by that in terms of appealing to different people. Just to reach out to Denise, I think if I could just bring you in, because you've kind of got quite a profound point, I think, before handing over to Sharon to sum up. Yeah, Denise.
Just unmute myself. So yeah, this was, I think, a thought worth capturing on behalf of Sam, Amy and Sandy in our group, that when we looked at answering the first question, our words were very similar around noticing things, reevaluating things, adapting things. Very much we talked about getting back to basics, very low down on sort of Maslow around how we get back to the fundamentals. And we were very captured by a couple of comments by, I think, Shivani saying, well, actually the vision was the same, but actually COVID made us evaluate to a different path. And perhaps, you know, putting that simply, we knew sort of what we were doing and why we were doing it, but actually we changed our how we were going to do it. And then Pandian, we're very interested about these human rights violations. And I think something Laura said around that actually we've noticed some organisations keeping to their vision, and then other organisations being unscrupulous and taking advantage. and actually how we've noticed that contrast. So we felt it was very important to actually really capture a green shoot. And I think, as was just said, around the responsibility lies with us to make those changes. But a comment that kept coming up is, how do we remember and how do we never forget? And so we want to really just plant that green shoot, or water that green shoot of never forget, leave no one behind. How do we build that in? I think it's threaded throughout other people's feedback. How do we build that into our purpose? And so that actually we can look and say, right, okay, are we on the same vision? Are we, or do we need a different path? Are we on the same path? So I think, I hope that captures it on behalf of that group.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Denise. So, well, thank you very much for this part of the session, and I'm just going to hand over to Sharon now. Thank you very much, Sharon.
That was a fantastic. Oh, unmute. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me? Yeah. A fantastic set of contributions. Impossible to summarize, really, but I think what I'm hearing is some very big issues at play, big structural global issues, and the role of NGOs and governments in dealing with those. But what I heard more about was what's actually happening on the ground in communities. So, Chinaraj, you were saying about government didn't really get it, but in communities you started to work with the children, and actually government started to learn and listen and follow. And I think we've seen that in many parts of the world. And then, I think Charlotte's point about crisis and understanding crisis. I think everybody felt and understood the crisis when COVID came, but don't always understand the climate crisis. And I think actually linking the two, understanding how the two are linked, as James has highlighted. We caused the pandemic. It was expected. People ignored the problem of population growth, and there was a lack of action and tension. So what we caused, we need to cure, and so it's down to all of us. I think we've heard a lot of great examples of how people's attitudes and behaviours have changed. And Jill's right at the start talking about how people and staff are behaving differently and supporting each other and flexibly working in different ways. I think that's really heartening, what we've heard. So much about on the ground, Usman's examples as well of working with farmers and actually just collaborating in new and different ways. I think we've all learned that we can do much more than we thought without having to travel to the places we thought we needed to travel, and we're learning to do that. And I think, from Denise, is a very nice ending to the conversation, because it is about us noticing, about adapting, about getting back to fundamentals. I couldn't possibly really summarize such a rich conversation, but I'm really glad that it's recorded, because I think there's so much in there that we can pull out and think about and reflect on. And I think the way that we live our lives, the way we produce our food, the way that we act in and on the planet are so important. And I think we've all must have learned a huge amount. I've certainly learned a huge amount from all of you, full of admiration. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who has participated in this. So I'll hand over now, I think, to Laura.
Yep, so just very final word from me to say thank you, essentially. So thank you, Sharon, for running this. Thank you to the core CAPLA team, Ian, Lorna and Rosie. Also to all the facilitators, so Nicola, Peter, Denise, Sue, and most of all, thank you to everyone who's contributed for what I think has been a really fantastic webinar. And as Sharon said, if you want to watch this back, reflect on any particular parts, or pick up some conversations, it will be available via the CAPLA Horizons website. So take care of yourselves until we see each other again. Thank you.